I am looking at effective leadership for organizational growth. How did God do it, and how must we do it? So the first time that I was contacted, and they talked about God as CEO, I started thinking about this, and I said, okay, if God is the CEO, then it means that it is God who has hired you and I to be in a place to take charge of his assignment. And so we are hirers, and we are employees of God at the same time. Then this morning, when the session was going on, we all heard and we all took notice of the statement that hire slowly, fire fast. Hire slowly, fire fast. And so I was thinking that really, if today we are in positions of trust, and God has given us the positions in leadership at any point in time, it means that God took his time and made sure that he went through whatever it was to be able to get you and I to take up positions. God nurtured and hired us slowly, and so he did not make a mistake. But it was very, very touching, when it says that fire fast. It means that if we are not doing the bidding of our CEO, what happens to us? What happens to us? We will be fired. And I cannot imagine God firing us. The wrath of God can be something else. And so it's important for us to know how God did it and how we are going to do it, so that the organizations that we are leading now can grow and grow in the way and the direction that God wants us to grow. So we will start off by looking at, leadership and effective leadership. You see, that whole concept of leadership is just the manner and approach that you will provide direction. Because remember that God has hired you to do something. It means that whatever you are doing must be in tune with what that shareholder, that 100% shareholder who is God, wants you to do. And so you are supposed to lead with a kind of direction. We talked about motivation, and that was when, the team was talking about retention. How do you motivate the people to be with you? And the influencing part of leadership. Leadership is about leading, and leadership is about providing influence. And that influence means that you must have a certain strategy, you must have a certain direction, so that people will follow you. They should not follow you just because it is you, but they should follow you because there is something that you have. And that is in particular cases when you are talking about organizational results. You need leadership that will support the organization to grow. Again, effective leadership must therefore be able to build resilience through their people to the organization. And that in itself calls for the management and the appropriate distribution of resources. We know that God has blessed us with so many resources, but it is for us to manage these resources well. And that is why when you get into leadership role, you are expected to have that mindset that knows where the business direction is going and how you'll be able to manage the resources that have been given to you to make the best out of for the organization. Because when you do that, then you are actually looking at the people. The people is the core asset. And it's very interesting that every time when we talk about people, yes, we get the statement that, your people are the most valuable asset that you have. That is true. But you ask yourself whether our daily dealings with our people as leaders is indicating and establishing the fact that our people are the core part of the business. And that is what God wants us to do. And therefore, if you want to be an effective leader, you need to build people. People management must be a core pillar. Yes, other things may come in, but the core pillar is to build teams, build successful teams that will deliver, because that is the assignment that the shareholder, the God who has lifted us, the God who has actually given us this role, expects of us to do. That should be our strategy. And again, when we talk about organizational growth, a lot of us will immediately think about profitability. Nobody is doubting that, because that is what has been designed, especially for business-oriented organizations. Everybody is thinking about, profitability. We are thinking about productivity. We are thinking about the brand strength and how we can create brand affinity. We are thinking about the employer-employee value proposition and why you should be able to attract people. We are thinking about, the stakeholder buy-in and the organizational culture. These and many others actually determine how the organizational growth or success can be measured. But at the same time, we know that underpinning all that success, it's about the kind of leadership that we showcase and how we drive leadership to be able to have that composite culture that breeds success. And so, in effect, every organization has got a personality. So the personality of the organization is seen through the lenses of the leader. The leadership, and I say that, you can measure the temperature of an organization through what you see in a leader. And so that is why effective leadership is so critical, especially when we know that we have been hired by God, He has His strategy, and we must follow that strategy. And so who then is an effective leader? We are talking about somebody who sets clear vision and can translate the said vision into reality. It is not enough to say, I have a vision. Everybody can dream and have a vision. But the one who is effective is the one who is able to translate that vision into reality so that actionable activities that will ensure that the vision that you have comes to, the forefront where it can be utilized. A leader, an effective leader, is one who has followers, and the followers believe in your vision and your actions. So if you have people who are following you just because of what they can get from you, but not necessarily because they believe in the journey that you want to go along with, then you should question your leadership, because then there is something that is not going right. But they must believe in your actions. An effective leader is one who can influence to maximize output. And the discussion that we had this morning, it's indicating how, as leaders, we should be able to get the best out of everything. That we talked about resources, never available, never enough. But a leader is the one who is able to appropriately distribute the resources equitably to the point where everybody is using the little resource to come out with some maximized results. And that is the kind of leader we are talking about. A leader, an effective one, must be sensitive to building the skills of his people. You need to build the skills of your people. The one that you took, the best candidate that you picked from your hiring process today may be still tomorrow, unless you are able to ensure that there are mitigating factors that are actually supporting the person to improve. Because the skill set that your people had yesterday will be obsolete today. If they had the best skill sets today, they'll be obsolete tomorrow. How do you retain them and how do you get the best results out of them if you are not effective? And so these are some of the ways by which people get into leadership. And that is where we need to ask ourselves whether the way we got into leadership is actually translating into the way that we should be doing our work. So the first one is promotion. People get into leadership because they've been promoted. And that is all there is to it. There's no preparation, they get the status, and if people get into position that way, then of course you can understand that they think that it doesn't take anything to get there. And so their vision, their attitude towards, the building the organizational growth becomes an issue. There are some who are elected or the position of leadership is conferred on them. They do not actually share or sell anything that brings them that leadership. So they feel that so long as they've been elected, conferred, then it means that everybody is in the same boat with them. There are some leaders who are leaders because of their intellectual power. They have what it takes. And the brain, and those are the book smart people, intellectually inclined to be leaders. But for others, it's just a family inheritance. Your parents were kind enough to start a business. It is now your generation, and you take over. And so, what kind of preparation, what kind of outlook do you have? And personality or charisma, depending on the particular situation. When it's a crisis situation, when you need a certain kind of turnaround, sometimes you need people with personality, people with charisma, who will move everybody along and who will get, all the noise around it. And so people become leaders just because of their charisma. And sometimes it is your high moral example. And we talked about it as people who know that God is our hirer. When we know that God is the one who owns the business, He is the CEO, then indeed our high moral example is the reason why we should be in leadership. And it is the reason why we should drive effectiveness of our organizations. To be defined as a leader, you need to have character. So you must be the same person in the light, the same person in darkness. The same person during the day, the same person at night. Your values must drive your attitude. If you're a leader without values, you cannot be effective, because the wind will blow you anywhere, and wherever the wind blows you, you go. So there is no value and there is no pillar that is supporting you. Your perceptions and your aspirations should indicate the character you have. What kind of aspirations? Because this will drive the lead, and that is how they are going to be with you. So the way you treat others, it's a sign of the character of that leader. You must be knowledgeable. And so organizational insights. You are a leader of an organization. Do you understand what is happening inside your business, your sector, the industry, competition, or you are just stuck to just your daily routine as a leader? If you don't have knowledge about the national and global perspectives within the sector that you are operating and within other analogous, kind of organizations, you'll just be stuck in there, and your perspective will be so parochial that you cannot bring effectiveness into your business. Stakeholder information. It's important for effective leaders to know the stakeholder that they have. Whether they are internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, what kind of diverse interests do they have, and what kind of power do they have? When you are able to create that stakeholder grid, then you are able to know those who have power and interest, those who have power but maybe little interest, those who have interest but have no power, and those who have no power and no interest, and be able to invest your time and resources in handling and managing these stakeholders in a way that brings you the right results for your organization. Regulatory compliance and risk profiles, you need to know them all. A leader, an effective leader, must have abilities. Your abilities include your management skills, how you are able to bring people together, bring resources together, and manage them effectively. Conflict management, because conflict will always happen. It doesn't matter. Sometimes they even happen for good. Sometimes they can be destructive. And therefore, you need a leader who has the skill to identify conflict, to manage the conflict, and get the right resolution. Negotiation skills. A lot of things happen. People come to you with different ideas. Organizations, people you have to deal with, your stakeholders come to you with different ideas. What kind of skill in negotiation have you built such that you'll be able to make the right judgment? You'll be able to think of a win-win situation for your organization, for your people, and for the one who has hired you, God, to be able to deliver. A leader must have the ability to build relationships. And these relationships are not just events. They are, long relationships, because you need that strong kind of network, internal and external network, that you need to form. Sometimes you are able to get to where you have to get to as a leader for the good of your organization and your people when you have the right people and you belong to the right network. Understanding of the people dynamics in the internal environment. You cannot be a leader who is just sitting on the high horse, not understanding what is going on within your environment, within the organization itself. Because it is not just about the people, but the people dynamics, especially the informal activities and informal groupings that happen in your organization. That is what a leader, you must have the skill to be able to know, understand. Observation is important here. And maintaining your relevance and your gravitas within the stakeholders. So a leader should not be shaken by just every event, just by every single situation. A leader must have the strength and the gravitas to stand and say that this is the situation, but this is how I want to deal with. And then you get people along, because when you have a leader who is so weak that you flow any direction, then the people become helpless. But the leader is the one who will stand and say that, yes, the resilience that I have is what will make me relevant in this kind of situation. And so I want to just share a few attributes that leaders must have for organizational growth. And these attributes, I said Jesus' example. In all that we are saying, that is the fundamental issue. That is what is underpinning your effectiveness or otherwise. And so effective business communication. As leaders, we need to have cultured communication, cultured speech. Don't just say anything because you have to say anything. Don't just use the language that is awful. Don't let your people feel that, you disrespect them by the way that you communicate, whether in writing or in speech or even your body language. Don't be that kind of leader who shows disrespect by not even listening to people. That kind of leader who will not even respond to a simple good morning. That kind of leader who will not show a body language that says that, look, I appreciate what you are doing. Because your tone of voice, your language, your body language must all be persuasive so that, people will be able to understand. A leader must be articulate. You must be able to articulate your vision, your actions, your strategies in a way that it will be like the magnet that will attract everybody to come around and support you to deliver. And I said, what is Jesus' example? Jesus did same. Jesus made sure that when he wanted to give us the commandments, the things that he wants us to do, he made sure he wrote it. The 10 commandments. Do not steal. It is very clear. It is simple. It is quoted. Do not envy. It is there. Serve only the Lord. Very clear. And so when you take the 10 commandments, it is a template for us to say that we need policies. Very clear, concise policies that our people will understand. That was Jesus' example. Jesus always used parables. And you ask why? Because he was that kind of situational leader who always had the people in mind. So he gets to a place, he gets to an agrarian community, and he knows that if he has to speak with them, he should use something that is about agriculture so that the people will appreciate and be aligned to it. And that is the kind of leaders that will propel organizations today. Leaders who know and will be able to think on their feet, know the circumstances and the people that they are working with. And that is why you need to know the dynamics in your organization. The James and John episode. Even when James and John were struggling to say, let me sit on your right or your left, looking for greatness, Jesus did not just dismiss them, get off my back. No. He took time to explain to them what leadership or sitting on his right or left mean. And that is what we need to do with our people. Even when the situation seems like we wanting to kick them off, let us ask ourselves, do they understand what they are asking for? So that we will use language, communication to be able to explain to them what it is. And that is when they come to appreciate the enormity of whatever they may be asking for. People are clamoring for positions every day. People are clamoring for promotions. Let them understand in the right, concise language whether what they are asking for is what they are cut out for, and they can bear their responsibilities. Emotional intelligence. We need to understand the people we work with. We need to understand and care for our teams. Empathy and compassion. And that is what the Samaritan woman, enjoyed from Jesus. We know the Samaritan woman, this is a woman who had lived with 5 men, and even this last one was still not, her husband. But you see, Jesus did not condemn her. He had compassion. Sometimes we condemn people. We have people in our team that they are washouts. But indeed, find time to understand them, show them compassion, and sometimes they become even better employees. Jesus fed the 5,000. Jesus had that emotional intelligence that when he was about to preach to them, to give that sermon, he knew that the people were hungry. It takes the emotional intelligence of a leader to know how his or her people feel and be able to provide the right resource and the right solution at that time. At that time, he didn't say, let me finish preaching and go and find your food to eat. He said, what can we give them because the people are hungry? He found food for them. And after that, when you have provided for them, when you want to give them the message, they are ready for you. So as a leader, know your people, have that emotional intelligence. And when Jesus had fed them, they were happy to listen to him. You need to have integrity. You need to be honest and trustworthy. Without this, you are next to nothing as a leader. And your end will be as disastrous as that of Judas Iscariot. Judas had leadership position, but he had no integrity. He could not be trusted. In the end, he sorted himself out. And that is what we need to find as leaders, that integrity is what defines us. Otherwise, we will not be fit for purpose. Let us not be judgmental. A lot of us leaders, we are holier than thou. And that is our attitude, that is our behavior. We think that we are best, we are perfect, and so everybody else will put you in a kind of jacket, and then we'll be able to determine, yeah, you are this, you are that. When I look at your face, when I look at how you behave, you are like that. But indeed, let us seek the full picture of situations as a leader before we jump to hasty conclusions, because sometimes our perceptions and stereotyping drive us. Just the same way Zacchaeus. Who didn't know that Zacchaeus was a tax collector, not just a tax collector, but one who was a cheat? But you see, Jesus gave him the chance. He wanted to have the full information, the full knowledge, be in his space. And that is why he said, you and I wouldn't have gone to Zacchaeus' house. Never would we have done that because we don't want to be tainted by this kind of person. But what did Jesus do? Because he didn't want to be judgmental, which is what we have to do, he went there. What about Mary Magdalene? That woman who was called an adulterous woman. So they had even brought her to the point that, yes, we caught her in the act. What did Jesus do? He says that any one of you who did not or who has not committed any sin, let him cut the first stone. Sometimes people will come to us and tell us stories about other people in the business, our team members, our employees, and we jump to conclusions because you think you want to trust the person who says another person is bad. Or because you have categorized people. When I look at this lady and the way she does this, the way she dresses, the way she so, smiles with everybody, I think she belongs to this. And therefore, let somebody come and gossip about that person. And that is your fact that you are using to judge. But Jesus did not do that. But the point is that Jesus hates sin, but he doesn't hate the sinner. And so you hate the activity and what somebody is doing, which is wrong. Find a way of bringing the person back on track and not to hate the person. But a lot of us as leaders, we are not effective because our minds are prejudiced and jaundiced with all kinds of perceptions and, stories that we hear about other people in our teams. And so we write them off. Don't let us be judgmental if you want to be an effective leader. We need to be creative and innovative. We need to know our audience. What kind of approach do we want to use to get the best out of our teams so that our organizations will be successful? And that is why we talked about Jesus and the parable. He knew that if you use certain parables in certain locations, they may not even understand. But if you use what is common to them, and that is why we cannot always pick everything wholesale, hook, line, and sinker, and try to implement everything wholesale in our environment. It may work, it may not work, because you have certain different or unique circumstances that will portray that you need something and not the other. And so we need to be creative. Leadership is not about hanging on to the status quo. Leadership is about thinking every day and looking at what can I do next? What can I do differently? How can I do it? How can I bring the people on board? How do I make sure that the people are excited about this? That is about leadership, not the leadership that will be stuck to routine because it was done like that 20 years and nothing has fallen apart. Let me continue to do it the next 20 years. That is not Jesus' example. Reward and sanction or effective leadership is about taking recognizing people for what they do, but also being involved in difficult conversations. Sometimes we run away from difficult conversations, and that is when we ask others to do, or we try to overlook. But if you want to be effective, it is about the carrot and the stick. It's about, giving the carrot to those who need to be rewarded, and, using the stick to actually clear those who need to be cleared. And that is why you fire fast. And so what did Jesus do? When we track people's processes and we identify areas of, improvement, let us align our rewards and make them right. Let us ensure that our sanctions for wrong is also there. Jesus, with all that we know of him, when he got into the temple and he realized that the people were selling in the temple and that was not the right place to sell, what did he do to them? Did he go baby kissing them or hanging his hand around them? He flogged them. He sanctioned them. And that is what we need to do. Leadership is not a popularity contest. So you should not think that I want to be the most popular person. In fact, when you are that kind of person, you may be a weakling. They will take advantage of you. Your organization will suffer. And one day the legacy you leave is that, as for him, as for her, anything went, anything goes. And that is not an effective leader who has been called by Christ. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let's encourage different perspectives. When we talk about diversity, yes, we are not talking only about gender. Gender is one of them. Age or generational diversity, professional diversity, cultural diversity. We are talking about people with different abilities. We are talking about all kinds of things. How is your hiring such that you have a certain mindset about a certain group of people? And so the moment you are even going into that hiring process, you have already assumed that, no, a woman cannot do this. You have already assumed that, this person who cannot, or who is coming from this background. The halo effect always, destabilizes our leadership effectiveness. But when we need equal representation, especially at, senior levels, when we need unity, and when we talk about the diversity, of course, we know it's about having all these different people. Inclusion is so important because, as it is said, Inclusion is not just being invited to the party, but being invited to the dancing floor so that you'll be part of those who are, taking that decision. So it is not about just ticking the box to say, I have employed 20 women. I have employed, young people. But really, they are not in positions where they can deliver. But God, and what did God do? In creation, God brought different things and different people. Different things. And in that unity, there is sameness. Sameness that is, or differences that are purposeful. I'm different from you. You are different from somebody. The tall tree is different from that short tree and everything. The river is different from the pond and all. But he created to create that kind of synergy that we also, as business leaders, must create, because diversity, equity, and inclusion are important elements of effective leadership. Talent management. Give others the opportunity to test leadership. Work with your management team. Some of us hold everything to ourselves as leaders. When we step out, nobody can take a decision. When we step out, the keys to our offices are with us. When we step out, nobody will be able to say, let's go right or go left. Why? Because we are afraid of our own shadows. And any leader who is afraid of his or her own shadow is a failed leader. A leader who is bold to know that I can even be redundant tomorrow because I've trained enough people who can take my place is that kind of leader. And so Jesus, he taught his people. That is why he had his inner circle. So imagine that your inner circle is your management team. Peter, James, and John, sometimes he will put them aside and have certain high-level conversations with them because he knew that his time on earth was going to be short. He was leaving, but he wanted a legacy. Today, we are sitting here because of that legacy. And therefore, that is why you need to train your people, to give them the opportunities, to delegate to them, and let them be powerful disciples of what you do and what you want to do. Humility. Sometimes you find the person humble yesterday, but let him or her get the position today. Suddenly, some arrogance is conferred. Some pride is conferred. And you cannot even walk with your hand beside you. It must be that. But you see, that is not servant leadership. The Son of Man, Jesus said, when he was talking to John and James, when they were asking for greatness, he said the Son of Man had come to serve and not to be served. And so if you are the Son of Man in leadership, then you have been put in leadership to serve and not to be served. And that is why servant leadership, getting your hands together with them, do it with them, and then they'll be able to help you to achieve organizational success. You need to have contextual openness, right? We are asking for transparency in leadership, openness, integrity, and everything else. But remember that whilst you have to be transparent and share information, you need to share information on what we call need-to-know basis. A leader must have that concept that, do I need to divulge this information at this time to these people at this place? Maybe yes, go ahead. Yes, maybe they need to know, but they don't need to know it today. They need to know it tomorrow, and therefore I'm holding it till tomorrow. Oh yes, this is the right place to do it. Or no, let's wait and do it at the other time. What did Jesus do for us? The Son of Man, for servant leadership, we are talking about he washing the feet of his people and all. But contextual openness, we are saying that Jesus foretold his death. Jesus told the people about his disciples about his death, but he never told them, and today we still don't know the time or the hour. And that is contextual openness. Very quickly, we need to learn to teach. So issues about mentorship, studying, etc. And Jesus' example, and Tom said it, that Jesus told them, he taught them, that for some of these things that you want to heal, these diseases or challenges, ailments that you want to heal, it's not only about prayer, but it's about prayer and fasting. So teach the people that work with you. Seek feedback. Help people to appreciate by you seeking feedback. And Jesus did it. Jesus said, what do people say that I am? And that was seeking feedback. And what do you, my disciples working with you, what do you say that I am? How many times do we seek feedback from our people, those closer to us and those far away from us, because we think we know it all? Respect for culture. Don't be blind to the culture of your people. Don't work in the cultural environment and think that you will disrespect their culture. Because Jesus said what? Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's. And you need to be flexible. Flexibility is not always about hanging to the status quo. Rigidity is not the way to go in today's businesses. You need to make sure that as a leader, you are flexible. And that is why when his people were hungry, and it was on the Sabbath, and the Sabbath, they were not supposed to do certain things. When they got to that, corn farm, and they were hungry, they plucked the corn. But Jesus did not condemn them because he knew at that moment the issue of flexibility for the sake of his people without, breaking the law was important. You must be a strategist. So work through your environment, your organizational environment, because the master designer, God, ensured that man needed. That is why God created man last. He made sure that by the time he created us, everything we needed, the trees, the water, the fish, the everything was there. And so if you're a leader, you must be a strategist. What should be your topmost priority and why should that be? And be a shepherd. Care for your own. Ensure that there are employee engagement and retention strategies. Look for the lost. When people are not, are lost in your business, look for them. They may be there physically, but they are lost. And so Jesus left the 99 and went to look for that one sheep who had gone astray. So let me very quickly run off to say that you must be a visionary leader, thinking as a visionary one. You must be somebody who solves problems and decision making. You must be a problem solver, a decision maker, communicate and build relationships. And that is so key. Nurture and sustain these relationships. Ethics and integrity. We are looking for ethical leaders. That is the kind of people that, God as a CEO is hiring or has hired. So if you are not an ethical leader, then I'm sure your firing will be very fast. Adaptability and resilience. Consider the changing environmental conditions, the nature of things, and be able to adapt and be resilient enough to still move your organization forward. Because life is not static, and the world will not wait for you. You need to be dynamic and think around how you can adapt to situations and be able to get. So to surmount all these challenges, to improve productivity, we need leadership commitment, employee engagement, accountability, and a sense of ownership. And it must all be led by the leader. Leadership performance reviews, development activities should be based on well-defined leadership competencies, including exposure to both local and international best practices. We need to use succession planning and talent acquisition strategies to fill executive roles so that we can build a strong pipeline for our organizations. Let us shape the conversation around effective relationship to build appropriate consensus so that collaboration, teamwork will survive, and that will help the organization, and then we can avoid duplication and wastage. Let's leverage on technology. It is what it is. And we are saying that technology rules the world today, but it is people who make it happen. And therefore, make sure that your people are supporting you for speedy discussion. So what do you work for? Some people are working just for their paycheck. But really, if you have been hired by God, then you need to work for the common goal of your organization. The success of that organization is the target that God has given you. And how do you respond to that? So in conclusion, a leader can diligently exhibit these qualities when that person actually has the attitude of self-discipline, the right attitude, knowledge, boldness, diligence, and impartiality. And all must be underpinned by intentionality. If you want to be successful as a leader and run the business so that when God comes and he should ask you and I, we will have a good and reasonable answer to give. But let me give this quotation as the last, one. And this is from a book, Education by Ellen G. White, page 57. Ellen White, or somebody who was, the Holy Spirit led her to write several books, and she is one of the key pillars in Adventism, and I am an Adventist. And so I quote this. He said that the greatest want of the world is the want of men, and I know that men here is used universally. So the greatest want of the world is the want of men. Men who will not be bought or sold. Men who in their inmost souls are true and honest. Men who do not fear to call sin by its right name. Men whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle to the pole. Men who will stand for the right though the heavens fall. But such character is not the result of accident. It is not due to special favors or endowments of providence. A noble character is the result of self-discipline, of the subjection of the lower to the higher nature, the surrender of self for the service of love to God and man. And that is what we are looking for. Who is our example? Jesus, our perfect example. Thank you very much.